my hair okay?
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Okay, good morning again, everybody. This is our 16th session of this Wandering Through the Big Book, and it's our 4th session on We Agnostics, and so far we've only gotten to page 46 of We Agnostics, so I'm going to try to speed it up and go right to the reading today instead of blabbering about whatever. So we're going to start with the spiritual appendix, and that's on page 567 of the 4th edition, if you're working out of a 4th edition. And here we go. Appendix number 2, spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. What they're saying is we each have our own experience. What they're not saying is that without a personality change, we don't recover. It's something they say again and again, but and it's going to take a spiritual power for us to get out of the trap of self-reliance that has brought us to whatever bottom we've been brought to. And that's going to necessitate getting some kind of awareness of and eventually relationship with this power greater than our minds and greater than our bodies. You know that in How It Works, it says, we're trying to convince you of 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we are alcoholic, and because we're stuck in our self-reliance, we cannot manage our own lives, or to say it another way, the fruit of our management are the bedevilments. We're going to hit the bedevilments in here and We Agnostics sooner or later, but that's what I get if I stick to my self-reliance. Trouble with personal relationships, can't control my emotional nature, prey to misery and depression, all that stuff. Those are the fruits of my self-reliance. And I've got a book by, I'm blanking on his name, but it's called Fruits of the Spirit, and it comes from a Bible passage. And the fruits of the Spirit, fruits of living a life in the Spirit, are patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, the very things that we ask to be shown each morning in meditation, as we had in that opening reading. So at any rate, what they're saying is that this is not a cookie cutter deal. Every one of us has our own experience, and it's not the same, although there will be similar things, but that can be confusing. And what they're trying to say is, well, I'll read it. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, or religious experiences, or spiritual awakenings, or spiritual experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals, because that's what they describe. You know, Bill has, people call it a white light experience. Most of us don't have that. The guy at the end of this chapter is going to say that the conviction of the presence of God flowed over and through him like a tide at flood or something. And it's a significant and strong experience of whatever you call it. And so they're just trying to backpedal a little bit and say, it doesn't have to be that way. Absolutely, for me, these awakenings have been so gradual, but it's been enough that I know the book is not a lie. I know the book is telling the truth of their experience, and this stuff is available to us. And we're about to read that, you know, with few exceptions, we've tapped an unsuspected inner resource. Every one of those words is important. Unsuspected. You know, we come into this thing thinking, I don't know what's wrong, but I sure don't feel I've got it. And they're saying, yeah, that may be the way you come in here, but sooner or later, if you're able to do this work and tap into this thing, you're going to know this is not a lie. unsuspected in a resource. Anyway, okay. Let's see. Must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden and revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create this impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Okay, so the risk here is that you're going to use that contempt prior to investigation, because that's what that is, concluding that I've got to have this overwhelming thing like Bill did, or overwhelming thing like Fitzmayo did at the end of this chapter, and I can't have that, so I'm not going to bother trying. I am getting more and more convinced that my human nature, my body and my mind, do not want me serving God. My body and my mind want me serving me, want me serving it. You know, when step 10 says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. My body and mind say something that I can't say here. Skip that baloney. You know, I want you serving me. I want you doing the work to make me happy, make me feel fulfilled, or whatever it is. And that's the trap. And the unfortunate thing is, if I haven't gone through this tedious process of 4 through 9, this uncomfortable process of really examining the way I think, trying to understand what my primary purpose has been, even if I didn't think it was a primary purpose, talking about this stuff, trying to categorize character defects, praying for their removal, and then making amends for their harmful effects. I'm never even if I could get still, I couldn't hear anything. All I'm going to hear is me. That's why this work is so important and so difficult, and why my human beingness doesn't want to do it. So what I'm really trying to say is, do not use this contempt prior to investigation to keep you from doing the work. My experience in AA was I definitely wanted no part of making amends, no part. So myself concluded that, you know what, we're not getting near step 9. So don't you even make a resentment list. I was working with my second sponsor. How you coming with your resentment list? Now, I had all kinds of excuses. I didn't want to get near it, but it was really because I didn't want to get to 9. I'm getting off the track, but the point is that this whole process, going to meetings, working with sponsors, trying to be of service, and particularly prayer and meditation. This is our 4-part solution to a 3-part problem, a physical problem, a mental problem, and a spiritual problem. And we do this as an act of faith. I heard in a meeting yesterday just a wonderful statement. Somebody was saying, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can surrender. And the next person up at this meeting said, you surrender by doing the steps. I thought it was beautiful. That's how we do it. Of course, we don't want to surrender. Of course, you know, How It Works talks about we ask God's protection and care with complete abandon. This is before the 3rd step prayer. We ask God's protection and care with complete abandon. You know, hold up your hand if you think you've done that. I sure haven't. You complete abandon. You know, it takes a while, and it's the same answer. I do this complete abandon by going through the steps. And remember, the objective of the steps is to get to 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. It's not a gateway, or it's not a certificate of completion. It's a cleaning out process so that we can actually hear when we when we try to listen. We can hear when we ask and we try to listen. You know how people will say this is what you can bring the whole thing down to 4 words: pause, ask, listen, and do. Quit playing God, invite God in, do as directed. That's another way of saying the same thing. And it's also 10, 11, and 12. 10 is the pause, 11 is the asking and listening, and 12 is the action that we get out of doing 11. Okay, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. How true this is for most of us. You know, other people sense that we're different, even though we still feel stuck in our stuff, whatever that stuff happens to be. We finally realize that we have undergone a profound alteration in our reaction to life. This thing is huge. You know, my problem is not my life. My problem is my reaction to my life. My problem is my confusion around my reaction to my life. And changing that reaction, that's where I lack power. I jump into resentment, fear, remorse in a heartbeat, most of us do, because we lack power over that reaction. And the way we change that is 10, 11, and 12 on a constant basis. And there's a second important part here. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, and that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Why? Because we lack power. And not only do we lack power, we're going to the wrong thing for advice. We're going here to figure it out, to tell us what to do. And as long as I'm going here instead of here or whatever, I'm going to keep getting the same answers, because those are well-worn grooves in my mind over which I don't have power. What often takes place in a few months, well, I don't know about that. I don't know. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. Substitute self-reliance. You know, by years of me deciding in my human brain what I should be doing. But then here's a promise, with few exceptions. And I don't know what those exceptions are. I don't know. With few exceptions, you know, this is called wandering through the big book. This is not a forced march, so I get to jump when my mind says jump. So one of my very favorite spiritual writers is this guy Emmett Fox, and one of his first books was the 10 Commandments, and that's also based on Moses, where his Sermon on the Mount is really about Jesus. And in these 10 Commandments, he talks about how profound they are, and because they sound kind of superficial. Thou shalt not. And I remember this one where he says, he's talking about the one that says, thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. And he says, of course you should respect spiritual power, respect your spiritual creator. But what this means is you cannot call on God for help and have it be in vain. That's a whole different deal. He's promising that if you ask, you will receive. If you call on God's help, it cannot be in vain. So I don't know what these few exceptions are, but at any rate, with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception, their own experience of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Okay, so just to make this point, and I don't know why, but just to make this point. So they're saying this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Yes, of course. But there is more than just awareness. There are at least two more levels, as far as I'm concerned, of a spiritual experience. Becoming aware that this is not just a theoretical, moving from belief to experience. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and it's going to say it later in We Agnostics, that my awareness of this power greater than my body and my mind is the most important fact of my life. Well, there's a question. Is your awareness of higher power the most important fact of your life? I can say that today. I did not feel that 2 years ago. I would have told you a bunch of other things that were the most important fact of my life. So I'm just trying to say awareness is the beginning of this thing. The most important fact of my life is the next stage. And then another stage is we will feel as though we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. That's a whole nother deal. That ain't just awareness of, that's I'm interacting with. I am walking on the broad highway, and if you think about it, this was written before we had interstates. We got interstates today, but they were thinking of a broad highway, no stoplights or stop signs. You're really moving and it's smooth. They're not huge ups and downs and twists and turns the way there are in most roads when this was written. But the idea of walking hand in hand, living in partnership with this power. Now, how am I going to get there? That's where we say 10, 11, and 12 all the frickin' time. 10 is the awareness. I become aware of my disquiet, my restless, irritable, and discontent, my resentment, my fear, my selfishness, my dishonesty. I become aware of them. And I know what to do. Pray at once for removal. Share with somebody. Make amends if called for. Turn your mind to service. Turn your mind to the question, God, how can I best serve you? Right here, right now, in whatever situation I am in. That's 10. 11 is asking, getting some question. And the best question is, how can I best serve you? That's what step 10 is going to say. How can I, in this situation I'm in, how can I best serve you? Then comes the listening part, where most of us, I know me, I can ask the question, but I'm kind of busy up here. I got a lot going on. And it's very hard to listen. That's why I have to take a different tack. I have to go, well, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think about that, God? Can you give me a red light or a green light or a yellow light? And I can make that work for me. And then the beauty of it is when I get the red light, bad idea, Jack, once again. Then I can say, okay, and this comes also from Emmett Fox. He calls it claim the power. If you got the guidance, you claim the power. Okay, if that's what you want me to do, then give me the power to not do what I want to do, which is to tell somebody off or get angry or, go through the whole resentment thing or let them obsess my mind. And give me the power to not do that. And finally, if I will do as I'm directed, I will be, just like the reading said, I will be enabled to experience serenity right smack dab in the middle of the calamity. How awesome is that? Okay. Most emphatically, we wish to say any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience, in the light of what this book is trying to say, can recover. Only one thing is required: can recover, provided we do not close our minds to all. You know, it's interesting. It doesn't say provided we can open our mind to some spiritual concept. He says, provided we do not close our mind to all of them. If we can allow one spiritual concept to work its way into our minds, we can recover. We can make this thing work. I love this. Do you ever think of yourself as intolerant or belligerent? We can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find no one need have difficulty with the spiritual part of this program, which it's willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. And I wish he'd said and. The but has always confused me. And these are indispensable. So they're essential and they're indispensable. Honesty, openness, willingness. Honesty, openness means no contempt prior to investigation. We give it a go, we give it a try. Willingness to do stuff we don't want to do. And I take you back to red light, green light. God, do you really want me to make up this resentment list? Write this resentment list. You know, and if I get a green light, then I get to say, give me the power to do it, because I don't want to. Resentments are so distasteful. I don't want to think about them. Can't I think about you and your love instead of my resentments? I'd much rather do that. And the problem is they're so big in here. They occupy so much real estate in here. You know, I can want it, but I can't do it. And then this statement, this is quite a statement. And I know there's lots of debate about whether Herbert Spencer ever said such a thing and where they came up with this. I think maybe he got it out of William James's book. I don't know. There is a principle, or you could say practice, which is a bar against all information, which is proof positive against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep you in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Now, if I stick to it and we get to page 49, right in the middle, is going to say, I don't care how smart you think you are. I don't care what kind of experience you've had behind you. You have only two alternatives. One is to ask your creator in meditation to be its intelligent agent, part of ever advancing creation. And the other, your other choice, there are only two, is to believe your own thinking. And if you believe your own thinking, you're going to stay stuck in resentment, fear, and remorse, no matter what. So this contempt prior to investigation is serious stuff. And it's why I love Silkworth saying at the end of his opinion, you know, the last, if you want to direct anybody to it, tell them, go to page 1, find page 1. You know, it's chapter 1, Bill's story. Look to your left. It's only a half a page. And the last thing Silkworth says to us that we read this morning, I urge every alcoholic to read this book through. And though perhaps you came to scoff, you came to keep practicing your contempt prior to investigation, what's he say? You will remain to pray. A medical man telling us, read the frickin' book and learn how to pray. Okay. I don't know. Okay, so now we're going back to page 47 of the book, and where we stopped last time was in the middle of page 47. We stopped at the last paragraph. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question: do I believe, or am I even willing to believe? It's a huge open hoop. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And then it has the asterisk, and it refers to that appendix that we just read. This simple cornerstone is a willingness to believe. That's the start of this thing, is that instead of my contempt prior to investigation, I'm going to express and try to act on a willingness to believe. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. What's the problem here? Contempt prior to investigation, right? Before trying any of this stuff, before trying prayer, we figure, well, no, you've got faith, good for you, doesn't work for me, so I'm not even going there. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we say, oh, no, we don't say this, we say, oh, good for you. We look at it as, what does it say, weak and even cowardly. That's the way most of it, oh, good for you. I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes, but I cannot accept as true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. And then they say, don't worry about that. That's contempt prior to investigation. It's comforting to learn that we can commence at a simpler level. Now, in this study guide, there are the last pages on step 2 are these lists that they're titled attitudes that they all come from chapter 4, We Agnostics. Attitudes that hinder our progress, objections addressed, reasons to believe, directions for making a beginning. 4 different lists, and they come from this book, and I haven't really talked about it, but this is quite a book. I'm not even sure it's in print, but this is a guy going through the book and annotating it, adding footnotes, historical notes, all kinds of things, and that's where these lists come from. So if you're working with somebody in step 2 or working yourself in step 2, it's worth this. It gets you there. They're all they're reference to the book. It's and it's just good stuff. So what they're talking about here is reasons to believe, and also the things that are in our way. And they're about to state 2 of them. These are the things that are in our way: an inability to accept much on faith. Now, I keep saying, encouraging you to gamble. Just try it. Just try it. The gamble is they are not lying to me. We talked a lot about the proper way to read this, not proper, skip that. A way to read this book is to assume that every sentence is the truth of the experience of the people that wrote the book. Every sentence is their truth, and to take their statement and turn it into a question and ask yourself, is this true for me? And there are a couple of questions beyond that, but so So when we say an inability to accept much on faith, the solution is to ask yourself, do I think they're lying? Do I think this worldwide fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, numbering, I hope, in excess of 2 million people around the globe, that is based on a lie? Based on a manipulative lie for some reason? Well, they're just trying to sell me a book. They don't make any money on the book. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Contempt prior to investigation. Many of us have been so touchy that even a casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. What the? This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. I'm telling you, I am not capable of abandoning my thinking. I have to pray for its removal. Removal is a strong term, but the third step prayer says, relieve me of the bondage of self so I can better do what you want me to do here. 7-step prayer. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Not stands in the way of my serenity, not stands in the way of my primary purpose, whatever that is, stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. So I'm just saying, yeah, they're saying it's got to be abandoned. And if you can just abandon it, one of the prayers that you hear in some meetings is the set aside prayer. And it's a beautiful prayer because it's a lot more gentle than surgically remove, cut this out of me, God, please set aside everything I think I know about you, about AA, about my condition, about my everything set aside so that I can be open to a new experience of you and of your truth. It started by a man named Don Pritz, Denver, Colorado, one of the founders of Big Book Step Study and all that kind of stuff. And it's a wonderful, gentle prayer. Just set it aside. I'm not asking you to destroy it. Just set it aside so I can have an open mind and a new experience. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings faced with alcoholic destruction. This is where you get back to those two alternatives, and there's a whole worksheet, and we're not going to get to it today, I don't think, but it's in the study guide in step 1 called the turning point, avoid and seek, your only two alternatives. I think this is important. I think the major challenge of trying to sponsor somebody is motivational. How do I get people to give this a go? It's such a challenge. And I think one of the things that can be helpful is when somebody is able to acknowledge, you think there's a middle of the road solution. We don't think there is. That's what the bottom of page 25 says. If you're a real alcoholic, if you've got this allergy and you've got this mental condition and you don't have any kind of sense of God or relationship with God, you only get two choices. And it's basically go on to the bitter end, be doomed to an alcoholic death, drunk or sober, or do the steps. Those are your only two alternatives. Which one am I going to pick? Let's see, faced with alcoholic destruction, though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was no, most of the time this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. Yeah, well, I am so grateful that I have an allergy to alcohol, because I am absolutely convinced I would have gone to my deathbed believing my own thinking, and this whole idea of having a relationship with God could never have happened. And in my better moments, I feel a great debt to AA and to my Creator. And I love paying down that debt. I'm going to more meetings than I've gone to in a long while, and I can't wait. I'm almost feeling like I'm an AA addict at this point. I don't know if they're going to have a program for AA addicts. I don't know. But it's like I feel this debt. I'm grateful for what I'm experiencing today. I'm excited about the rest of my life, and I'm an old person. And I owe it all 150% to AA. And it's exciting at any rate. Okay. We're always running out of time, and I'm gonna try to get through this. Yeah. Still on page 48. The reader may still ask, we're stubborn and obstinate. We may still ask why we should believe in a power greater than ourselves. Well, we think there are some good reasons. Let's have a look at them. The practical individual today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, 20th century accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We've got numerous theories about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see and feel, direct and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. I know I said before, I got an iPhone. I use it all the time. I have no idea how it works. No idea how it works, but I can communicate with it. I can store information, get information, all this stuff. No idea. And it's the same way with the God thing. I have no idea. I have no idea how God got here, how I got here. At least today, I got a much better feeling of what I want to do while I'm here. And that's the whole notion of primary purpose. But what I want to talk about is having a reasonable assumption as a starting point. So between now and next week, if you get a moment, ask yourself, what is my reasonable assumption? How am I starting out on this whole thing? And be careful of contempt prior to investigation, because pretty quickly your mind's going to start explaining everything to you. And if you rest on that explanation, you're not going to be able to get very deep with the thing. You'll stop with the explanation. The ultimate answer, what's my reasonable assumption as a starting point? I don't have a clue. But courtesy of St. Ignatius and the Jesuits, I'm glomming on to his statement of my primary purpose, and it's getting stronger for me every day. His statement of my primary purpose and yours, whether you like it or not, my primary purpose is to love, honor, and serve my Creator, and thereby do the work that my soul came here to do, which I really am not very sure about. Other than I know some things I feel bring me closer to that primary purpose, and some things take me farther away. And I'm trying to learn to be proactive and start to see, yeah, I know you want to do this, but does that match up with loving, honoring, and serving your creator? And thereby saving your soul, are the words that he uses. And if I'm deciding that no, it doesn't contribute to that, then I'm asking for the power to turn away, to not do that. And in this thing, I know I'm off, I'm not on the book, but remember, it's wandering, it's not marching. This Ignatian stuff, and especially when you get to discernment of spirits, which is an appendix in the spiritual exercises. It's not in the body of the work. It's like an appendix. And it's all about understanding desolation and consolation. Desolation meaning out of sync with God and feelings of doubt and despair and fear. And consolation, which is in sync with God and feeling faith, hope, and love. Which would you rather feel? If those are your only two alternatives, which I would suggest they are, which one you want, you know? And it's only an alcoholic is going to say, well, how long do I have to decide? Do I got to decide right away? You know, can we talk about alcoholic death a little longer? I don't know about this life on a spiritual basis, whatever. So just before stopping, so this love, honor, and serve, what I love about that is loving is, love is feeling positive and wishing everything well, not condemning. Honoring is a mental thing of respecting and valuing, and then you can use different words, and then finally serve. So I believe love is the soul, that the honoring is the mind, and the serving is the body, that I'm of service in action. So at any rate, and I think it just lines up so beautifully with AA, and I hope we'll get a chance later on to talk more about it. Okay, so reasonable assumptions at a starting point. We're going to stop, and they're going to go on to talk about all of these scores of assumptions that most of us live with. And I'm suggesting it because it gets closer to primary purpose. I'm telling you, when I am clear about my primary purpose, nothing can go wrong. Nothing goes wrong. And when I'm unclear, yeah. Okay. I love you all. Thank you. I'm going to ring this gong and stop the recording, and then we'll have some open discussion. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you next week.